So I just got back from this movie and I don't even really know where to begin talking about it. This was an incredible movie. It's. I'm going to just say, as kind of a disclaimer, there's this entire film is a surrealist allegory. So what I'm reading into it is almost certainly not what the director intended for people to read into it, nor is it really probably what you would get out of it if you watched it. To me, this kind of crosses the line where it's so abstract, you almost can't even really take authorial intent into it anymore. That's always kind of an interesting part of to me, like the only real part of postmodernist literature or literary analysis that I think is really worth anything is kind of the deconstruction of tropes and themes and what kind of psychological meta narratives or whatever things represent. The death of the author, I think, is a very actually interesting observation. There's the school that the author is completely dead, and we can't read anything from the intentions of the person who wrote something. And then there's the other school that things only represent exactly what the author says they are. And I think largely the predominant view is the complete death of the author. I guess I'm kind of boringly enough somewhere in the middle. So this is just kind of my interpretation or what I'm putting onto it. I doubt this is what the author intended. But kind of a good surrealist film like this, it's not even really supposed to be a metaphor for something in particular, I don't think. I think it's more supposed to be there to trigger interesting thoughts, etc. So this is made by Darren Aronofsky, who's a director I generally like. He made Pi, which was good. Requiem from a Dream, which is very similar to this film, which is an uncompromising cinematic kick in the teeth. Requiem for a Dream might be the most disturbing film I've ever seen. It's certainly the best anti-drug film ever made. I haven't seen The Wrestler. I haven't seen The Fountain. Black Swan I didn't really like. And Noah I really liked. So in general, I think he's a good director. Whenever he pulls out kind of his surrealism, I think he's really good at that. So, did I like Mother? I loved Mother, personally. I doubt... It's the kind of movie, though, that I think just appeals to me specifically. Like, there's films I would argue are just good movies in general, like, that are objectively good, like The Two Towers, like Terminator 2, like... try to think of a film that came out recently that was really good. Okay, I'm sure there was another really good movie this year. I just have kind of lost my train of thought. But that I think are like objectively good. Oh, like The Dark Knight. I think are objectively good movies, and even if you don't like them, you have to acknowledge the way that it's well made. Then there's movies that are very much like this, which are for a specific audience. Some people might really love them and think it's the best movie ever. Other people are likely to despise them and just not get it, or just not like it. And I guess this is kind of the later. It really kind of appeals to a lot of things that I like. But when I say it's a good movie overall, I don't know. It's very much up to the individual basis. Like, going back to like my first reactionary review, I think Scooby-Doo on Zombie Island was, as far as a kid's cartoon movie, objectively one of the best ever made. I think anyone can look at it and say, yes, this was definitely better quality. This film is difficult to describe. So where to even start with Mother? Mother is really, 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 really weird and disturbing. It's a mixture of psychological thriller, allegory, surrealism, allegory, gothic horror. It kind of defines genre. It's definitely a horror movie. It's definitely a thriller, and it's definitely surrealist. Beyond that, it's very hard to classify it. The film changes genre a lot throughout it. So the film begins with, so the two kind of main characters in this movie are Jennifer Lawrence, aka Mother, and Javier Bardem, refer to them by any sort of name within the film. So the movie starts out with Javier Bardem with him placing a large crystallized object on a pedestal. They're living into they were living in a burnt out husk that becomes a newly renovated house, and Jennifer Lawrence wakes up wondering where her husband is. It turns out that her husband, Javier Bardem, aka him, is an acclaimed author suffering from severe writer's block. So let's talk a bit about the characters. His creative issues take a toll on the tranquil existence that Mother has created for the home, and she starts to see things around the house that unsettle her, including visualizing a beating heart within the walls of the house. So things are very calm, things are very peaceful. A trope that they use in this movie that's very similar to It Comes at Night is the surreal thing where, kind of the surrealist trope that the film only takes place in one location. The entirety of the movie takes place within the house. They don't go anywhere else. There's functionally no outside world. What I like about that is it makes the film extremely subjective. Everything is shown entirely from one character's perspective, and that character is never able to go out of a particular area. So it's always left very ambiguous what's happening beyond the walls of the house, what's happening in the wider world. Has everything gone crazy, or is it just here? Is it just the individual's paranoia? And that was something in It Comes at Night. We had no idea what the wider world was like. We had no idea if it was supernatural, if it was just a plague, if there were zombies, etc. And I think this can work when it's a deliberate decision used in kind of a horror or a thriller film, based on the idea that sometimes it's scarier to just not know things. So Jennifer Lawrence's character in this film is really likable. She's just about the perfect wife. Jennifer Lawrence is a very beautiful woman, especially in this movie. She's let her hair grow out, so it's exceptionally long in this film. And generally speaking, the longer a woman's hair is, the better. She really does have a very good figure. Sometimes women I find are a little overly scrawny. People think she's fat for some reason. I think that's just because she has more Nordic kind of roundish face, unlike a lot of women who have very, particularly Mediterranean women, who have very kind of narrow, fine features, and she has a much kind of fuller build. But I mean, her stomach is perfectly flat. She's clearly not overweight. She's just a little more voluptuous. But she seems to be pretty much the perfect wife. She cooks for her husband. She's working on renovating the house. She's unconditionally supportive of him. And they're living this tranquil existence, but her husband seems to despise it because he has writer's block. Despite her beauty, he won't have sex with her. He won't show her any real compassion or love. He's just completely cold towards her. So one day, a character known as the Man, I'm going to call him the Doctor, turns up at the house asking for a room. Her husband agrees, and she reluctantly follows suit. The Man has has coughing fits frequently. Once again, we don't really know what the genre of the movie is yet. So anything kind of supernatural or weird we think could just be her own stresses. We're not sure for a lot of this movie. Is it all in her head? Is everything just a projection of her own psychosis? Or is there something actually supernatural going on here? So the Man shows up and we just think that he has lung cancer because he smokes, he's hacking up. But she also notices that he has a wound over his rib area. So we don't really know what that's about. if we take this as the creation story, it's because he had his rib torn out to make his exactly my interpretation of this movie. So the next day, the man's wife, woman, shows up to stay, and mother becomes more and more frustrated with the guests. Her husband reveals that the man is dying and that he is a lifelong fan of the work of her husband, and that they have to let him stay to get to know him before he dies and they don't have anywhere else to go. Michelle Pfeiffer's character, the woman, is extremely cruel to the mother. She just she damages things. She messes things up. She makes rude inquiries about their sex life. Eventually, what happens is the two of them go into the man's into Javier Bardem's office, and they find the crystal thing. Now, he said that this is the single most important thing in his life, and that a disaster happened once that killed his family, and it gave him the strength to start over. And Jennifer Lawrence's character keeps trying to stop them from going into his office, but they go in and in a drunken stupor destroy the crystal. The writer is so distraught over this that he grabs the crystal with his bare hands, causing them to bleed. And this is kind of where we get into how I interpreted the film, which is about the destruction of modern masculinity and modern manhood, and kind of a metaphor for Europe. In my mind, as I was watching this movie, I called Javier Bardem's character the good conservative and Jennifer Lawrence Mother Europa. Because what Javier Bardem's character is most concerned about is status signaling, is virtue signaling, is how he's perceived by the outside world, that people think well of him. His traditional masculine responsibilities, that is to protect his family, specifically to protect his woman and to protect her honor, is something he just doesn't care about. He's willing to let Michelle Pfeiffer humiliate his wife. He just ignores and tosses aside her concerns. He allows her to have to just clean up after them as they just destroy stuff. He doesn't really care. He stops paying attention to her. He spends all his time just with the the doctor and his wife, just kind of lavishing himself with their praise and affection. He just kind of ceases to care about her, and this just kind of goes on and on. So they try to kick them out. Mother gradually kind of convinces him to kick it out. However, as they're about to leave, the couple's two sons arrive and start to fight over the will that their father has left. The oldest son will be left with nothing, so he fights with the younger brother and flees. While him, the man, and the woman take the injured son to get help. The mother, however, grows more and more paranoid after she's left alone in the house, and the oldest son comes back and takes the man's wallet, and he says to her, "You understand because you were left alone." After the crystal object gets destroyed, the man seals up his room. Now, I guess if we were going to look at this from a biblical perspective, what we'd say is the room he works in is Eden, and by shattering his crystal, they betrayed the trust of God, and they destroyed Eden, and he boards it up saying that they were banned from Eden. And by favoring Abel over Cain, by giving his youngest son the entirety of the inheritance, it causes the first sin, the first murder, where the younger son kills the older son. The older son kills the younger son. So I guess from a biblical perspective, we can look at that. But kind of the way I looked at it is, after the two brothers fight, the man, I'll just call him the poet, leaves his wife alone. He leaves her alone despite the fact that there's this guy who killed another person running around in the woods and could very easily come back and kill her. He promises that he'll call her from the hospital, but he doesn't. So he's completely unconcerned about her safety. All that matters to him is signaling to the other people how caring he is, how compassionate he is, how much he's willing to give, and he doesn't care about his wife, he doesn't care about his home. Once again, I kind of view Jennifer Lawrence's character as kind of being like the motherland, of being Mother Europa, Mother Canada, Mother America, being kind of the fertile land that produces our people and our culture and ourselves, and the poet being our inept, corrupt governments and ruler class who don't care about the people they rule over, who don't want to look to their safety, to their survival, etc. All that they're interested in is showing to the rest of the world how tolerant they are. And I did a couple of videos about this. But basically, how status signaling works is, or virtue signaling, is you want the people who you're helping to be as ungrateful as possible, to be as terrible as possible, to be as violent as possible. Because the more you can endure what they do to you, the more righteous you are. It's a perversion of Christian teaching, that there's virtue in suffering. However, I think the thing to understand is while God can bring good out of evil, that never justifies intrinsic evil. There's a difference between, I guess you could say, accidental evil, or things that are sometimes evil, and things that are intrinsically evil. Like physically removing somebody from your country or killing somebody are not things that are intrinsically evil. Killing in self-defense, executing someone who's committed a capital crime, killing in war, these are legitimate uses of killing, whereas rape is an intrinsic evil, if that makes sense. Basically just kind of covering up for intrinsic evil is part of what virtue signaling is. And the more evil the thing that people do, and the more you can endure, it's kind of like the shit test, the better you look. So after this happens, dozens of people begin to arrive to the house to hold a wake for the dead son. As the people come in, they start to destroy things. They start to break. They break one of her counters. They start to paint the house. They try to go into her bedroom and have sex on her bed. She's hiding in the bathroom, and a guy pops in and says, "I'm just exploring." So you have these people who are going through their house, just destroying everything. And her husband is like, well, I want them to be here because they love me, because they appreciate that I have them here and that I'm allowing them to grieve in my house. And they just fawn over him, and he makes some pretentious speech, and everybody just claps and is just etc. So once again, this is how I interpreted this, is how feckless our ruling class are. They're cucks. They don't care about their wife. One of them flirts with her, and a number of them try to like have sex with her, and her husband doesn't care, and it made me angry, because I'm like, she's your lady, she's your woman, it's your duty to protect her honor. If these assholes are like acting like she's a whore, and they come into your house and they disrespect your woman, it's your job to at the least kick them out, if not beat the shit out of them. And Jennifer Lawrence's character is not a post lady. She's a real woman who unconditionally loves her husband and wants to see him happy. And it just triggered me. And this is, I think, a general issue with a lot of males today. And the people who don't want to be like this are kind of screwed because everyone else wants them to be like this. Is men today have no honor, they have no dignity, and they have no... They become disconnected from basic masculine impulses. if you try to explain the concept of honor, of dignity or responsibility to at least most of the people I've talked to, they'll think you're crazy. They'll give you shit. They cannot understand it. It's like trying to speak Arabic to them. And that's an issue I often get into. What they will complain about is if they feel their public image as a tolerant person is being injured, and if they might lose money. Those are the only two things they care about. They will not stand up for themselves. Their dignity means nothing to them. In fact, if you try to stand up for your dignity in front of them, that will make them angry because they can't understand that. They can throw a narcissistic hissy fit like a child if you harm if you intrude on their narcissism, and they can get angry if they think it'll disrupt their money, but they can't understand the concept of dignity anymore. And that is something in a lot of my workplaces that I get into arguments with people over, because people just can't understand that. So she gets angry at him because he would have sex with her and because of that stuff. So the two have sex and she winds up believing she's pregnant. So when that happens, the poet is inspired to finish his work. So he sends the piece to his publisher and to his friends before he lets her read it, and it's so beautiful she cries. Upon publication, every copy is sold out, and the mother prepares dinner for him. She puts on a lovely dress. She makes this beautiful spread, and a bunch of fans arrive outside the house. So fans just begin to walk into the house to use the bathroom, and he just tells her that, look, the fans are here. I want them to be here. We have to share with them. We have to share with them because we have more than they do, so they can just take whatever they want. So they start by coming in and taking their food, and then they just start ripping things off of, they start stealing the cutlery, they start ripping stuff off of the walls. They all just grab him and try to touch him and try to take everything that they can. Because they need pieces of it. And she's like, they're destroying our house. And he goes, well, we have to share with them. These are just things. They can be replaced. And she's like, but I'm in danger. And he's like, yes, but they love me. And he doesn't care that his homeland is being ravaged. He doesn't care that his pregnant wife is being put in danger. All he cares about is status signaling. In fact, if anything, he loves this, because letting the people rob him shows just how tolerant he is and how loving he is and how much he can put up with. In fact, if they were to rape and kill his wife, that would show it even more. And you see this in Europe. I think a lot of the people whose, and this is, I think, a very good metaphor for the migrant crisis, whose children get raped, I think they want that to happen. I think these people are so narcissistic, so sick, so disgusting, that they want their children to get raped and killed, because then they can publicly forgive the murderers, and then they can show just how tolerant they are. But that's not a masculine response to things. In my mind, the most masculine response to someone fucking with your family was what happened in Texas. So this Texas father came across, I think he was an illegal immigrant who was trying to rape his 12-year-old daughter. So the Texas guy jumped on him and literally beat the guy to death. He kind of came to when the guy was mortally wounded and tried to call an ambulance. But he beat the guy to death and it was thrown out of court. That's what you're supposed to do when someone fucks with your family. That is the traditional manly thing to do, but this guy he's a conservative. He's the new male. He's our leaders. Even as Mother Europa, as the fertile motherland, as our people, the innocence of women and children scream for protection, he prefers to just let the degenerate, disgusting masses of the third world just stream in and just corrupt everything, tear up our homeland, loot it, etc. So things keep getting worse and worse and worse, and people begin to kill each other. People begin to have guns. The publisher takes part in the madness, executing fans uh, with uh, with gunshots. Military men show up to try to help the mother, but a cult of fans form around him, and they began to engage in rituals worshiping him. The military men are eventually overwhelmed by the horde, in no small part because the writer refuses to take their side. He takes the side of the fans. He doesn't want them to leave. He wants them to stay. He wants more and more people to come to steal more and more. And I think kind of like what will eventually happen to us, you have a lot of people in the government, in the military, in the police force who want to do the right thing. The fact that we have so many Dindus who get shot while obviously committing capital crimes, and the police being willing to take the punishment for doing their jobs, I think shows that. But they have no support from the leaders, and eventually they're going to get overwhelmed. So the soldiers who are trying to deal with the situation get slaughtered by the degenerate masses. So the mother goes into labor, and the husband takes her into the study. She gives birth, and the havoc outside subsides as the mother, as the poet tells the mother that the massive crowd wants to see the baby. Refusing, she holds on tight to her son. So eventually, though, she falls asleep, and the poet takes the baby outside to the crowd, who immediately grab the baby and break his neck. She tries to make her way to her baby, but she discovers that they have torn apart his corpse and are devouring the flesh. And that's a very adequate metaphor, I think, for Rotherham. We threw our children to these fucking degenerate scum, and we let them rape them, we let them kill them, we let them eat them, and it's I think eating the flesh is obviously supposed to be a Christian metaphor, and I think to a certain extent them eating the flesh of not Christ's flesh, but the flesh of one of our children is kind of a disturbing inversion of the sacrament of the Eucharist. That Christianity has been so corrupted and so changed to adapt to liberalism that we don't sacrifice Christ anymore. We sacrifice our own children, not for our forgiveness of our sins, but on the altar of our own narcissism. So she does what I'm sure a lot of us will do after we realize that the army's failed us, the police have failed us, and our leadership has failed us, and she grabs a piece of glass and begins stabbing the crowd, including killing the doctor from earlier in the movie, calling the murderers. So they strip her and beat her, calling her a whore. Also very familiar if you've seen the way that the rape gangs work in Europe. And him intervenes, and he tells her that they have to forgive them. They have to forgive them. They have to accept it. They just wanted to see the child. It wasn't their fault. They don't have any agency. We have to protect these people with no agency. We have to save them. Okay, sure, they ate our child, but we still have to be kind to them. It's our fault that they did that. It's not their fault. It's our fault for not being tolerant enough and loving enough. If only we had have given them more, then they wouldn't have acted this way. So the mother just gives up. So she goes to the basement and she finds a oil tank, and she sets it on fire, which destroys the house, herself, and some of the surrounding garden and trees. However, she succeeds to survive. She is horribly burned, and her husband is unscathed. He asks her for the love that she has left for him, and she agrees to give it to him. He rips open her chest and takes out her heart. The heart is the crystallized object from earlier in the movie, and he places it on the pedestal from earlier. The house regenerates or burnt out husk to a newly renovated house, and a newly formed mother forms in bed, and wakes up wondering aloud where her husband is, so everything restarts over. And I think it's true because our leaders never pay the punishment for their sins. They're safe in New York, they're safe in Toronto, they're safe up in their ivory towers, while the rest of us have to live in the world that they make. They always have their globalized cities they can withdraw to. They can always play their Game of Thrones, whereas the rest of us have to live with the consequences of their virtue signaling. And they don't die, even though they deserve it. It's always the innocent who suffer for the crimes of the guilty. So that's how I interpreted this movie as, in my mind, a commentary on the breakdown of the traditional role of the man in society, a breakdown of what Christianity originally stood for in its corruption by liberalism, and a breakdown in the social contract between the ruler and the ruled. So I think combining all those together is how I view Mother, why I thought it was a great movie. And if you're interested in surrealist, bizarre movies and you have a strong stomach, because this thing is really hard to watch if you don't, I recommend watching this. Mother gets a 10 out of 10 for me. I love the film. Let this be said, I don't hate everything that's artistic, and I don't hate everything in general. That's the review. I hope you liked it.